Welcome to our Artist Talk series and one of the very first Czech Republic theme semester events. Today we have Trisha Bender, who is the Artifact Collections Manager at the National Czech and Slavic Museum and Library. Trisha graduated from Goshen College in Goshen, Indiana, with a BA in English and Communications. She moved back to Iowa at that time and later graduated from the University of Iowa with a BA in Anthropology and Museum Studies certificate. While studying at Iowa, she held positions at the University of Iowa, Hospitals and Clinics Medical Museum. Her current position at the NCSML was accepted shortly after graduated in 2007. She also serves as the Vice President of the Iowa Conservation and Preservation Consortium and is a member of the Iowa Museums, Archives, and Libraries Emergency Response Team. And she is here today to talk to us about our recent installation of the show, Artists Behind the Iron Curtain. So welcome, Trisha.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Once again, my name is Trisha Bender, and I'm the Artifact Collections Manager at the National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library. My primary roles are cataloging the artifacts, seeing to their proper storage and maintenance, and maintaining our online collection, which is something that's a newer thing for us. It's only a couple years old, so we're adding to it. I also work with our curator to build exhibits and install the exhibits. And I coordinate our traveling exhibits program. So I've got my plate full. I have been working at the museum for over 10 years now. Now, before I get to the Freeman collection, I thought I would give you all a little history of the NCSML and its collection at large. It'll help you understand what we do and why we accepted the Freeman collection into our collection. So without further ado, there we go. This is the NCSML as it stands now. It was founded in 1974, displaying artifacts in an ordinary house before moving to a little cinder block building on the banks of the Cedar River, which goes right through Cedar Rapids. The new building opened in 1995. It's the building you see here, basically, with the triangle roof peaks and the red roof. It's featured at its dedication were the three presidents of the nations that make up our core focus. Havel of the Czech Republic, Kováč of Slovakia, and Bill Clinton of the United States. We still had the little cinder block building. That's where we kept the collection, and that's where my office used to be. So I was separated from just about everybody else on staff. Just as we were gearing up for our capital campaign in 2008, so we could hopefully move that collection inside the building after expanding it, a massive flood that went far beyond the 100 years mark devastated Cedar Rapids and the museum with it. Many artifacts and library materials were damaged, and some were lost, but for the most part, things weren't as bad as they seemed in the beginning. So for the most part, we recovered from that. We rose up and rebuilt, moving our building and adding on to it. So the only part of the added on, I don't know if you can see my cursor, is this part back here. You can see that. It basically extends all the way across the building and is a huge room with like basically a big gallery in the back. So our current building was opened in 2012 with 4 temporary exhibit spaces instead of just 1 and a large permanent gallery. Our inaugural exhibition in the permanent gallery was an extensive collection of original artworks by Alfons Mucha, a prominent Czech artist. It was amazing. When it closed in early 2013, we began building our current permanent exhibition that's called Faces of Freedom, the Czech and Slovak Journey. It opened in 2014. It tells the stories and experiences of all immigrants to the United States through the lens of the Czech and Slovak experience. We try to make that connection. So I wanted to tell you a bit about our collection. There are over 17,000 objects in the artifact collection alone. This more than doubles when you add our library holdings in. The vast majority of our collection is made up of textiles, featuring the traditional costume of the Czechoslovak people, which is also called a kroja. A kroj. Kroja is plural. It also is like tablecloths and handkerchiefs and all kinds of things like that. We are actually home to the largest collection of kroja in the United States. Our collection is formed exclusively from donations. The only artifacts or library materials that have ever been purchased that I know of were things that were replaced, were to replace the things we lost in the flood. Other than that, everything's been donated, so we depend on the generosity of Czech and Slovak immigrants or Czech and Slovak Americans. That being said, the criteria we use to determine what we want to accept is pretty simple. The objects need to be either Czech or Slovak. This is a Slovak kind of like bagpipe. They need to be either Czech or Slovak American. And this photograph kind of illustrates that. These are some Czech immigrants who are wearing their festival clothing in Cedar Rapids, actually. Or objects need to help tell the story, to help tell the history and culture of the Czech and Slovak people. This is a dumbbell from a Sokol organization, which is kind of a group. It was in the Czech Republic, but they formed here as well. So it was kind of bringing their community home, or bringing their community with them when they came here. So what is in the collection? There are quite a variety of materials within our collection, and there's actually more than I'm going to list here, but this gives you a little taste of it. We have glass and ceramics. Some are hand-painted, like this vase, and others are made of end-of-day glass and that sort of thing. There's vases and decanters and just all kinds of things. There are textiles. This is an example of an apron that's decorated with fish scales that were taken off the fish and dried and then cut and put on. We have wooden objects like the carving seen here, as well as carved pipes and instruments and marionettes and toys. And there's these really interesting walking sticks that I bring up because, yeah, I find them. They're one of my favorite things. They have these really intricate axe head handles. Well, they look like an axe, but they're not. And sometimes they also have little, almost like little metal badges attached down the stick part as well. We have dolls, which are usually wearing kroj, just like this doll from World War II. We have some vehicles. We have 3 motorcycles, Jawa motorcycles. One is always on display in Faces of Freedom. We rotate out the 3 of them, so one of them is always there. We also have a car called a Tatra, and it's painted black, and it was the type of car that was often used to pick up people who were suspected criminals of the state when Czechoslovakia was under communism. So it's in permanent display as well in our more historic section of the gallery. We have a building. Our immigrant home was the actual residence of a Czech family that immigrated to the United States and settled in Cedar Rapids. The family continued to live there for generations. We used the house to tell stories, immigration stories, as well as present Czech and Slovak holiday and seasonal traditions in a more authentic setting. And now this leads us to art. There are paintings, prints, drawings. We have certificates that are both marriage, baptismal, things like that, and sculpture, and many other things. Now that you know a little bit of what's in the collection and why, let's talk about what we at the museum want to teach others and how we use our collection to do it, especially in this case, the Freeman art collection. We'll begin that story with Socialist Realism. Socialist realism was the official style of Soviet art from the mid-1930s until the dissolution of the Soviet Union. It emerged as the result of the state's efforts to intensify and codify its control over the arts. And it was used as a means of transforming the nation's inhabitants into Soviet citizens. Under its principles, artists were to mirror reality as it was, as you can see from these two examples. They are pretty straightforward. Things look pretty much the way they did when whatever event happened, and there's not much deviation from that. By conforming to this style, artists helped to achieve the task of ideological transformation and education of workers in the spirit of socialism. Czechoslovak art began to mirror the Soviet art of the Stalinist era after the communist coup d'etat in February of 1948. Socialist realism was the state's official art, and as such, it was imposed upon Czechoslovak artists. A new centrally directed artists' organization was formed to ensure that all art was produced in the spirit of social realism. Any artist who wanted to be considered official by the state had to follow its ideological doctrine. These official artists received government support, while those artists who ignored the mandate were often prohibited from exhibiting their work. Now, fast forward to the 1960s and insert Lee Freeman into this environment. Lee Freeman first visited Prague in 1964. This picture is actually from 1988, but you get the idea. In '64, Czechoslovakia was a single country and had a communist government. A chance meeting with an artist named Jiří Mrázek, who is actually the man in this picture, with the darker-haired man. This began a lifetime of friendship that spawned a desire to collect contemporary art produced by Czechoslovak artists who sought a wider audience for their work. The government at the time imposed strict limitations on people, artists included. And as a result, Czechoslovak artists were often prohibited from exhibiting and selling their works. So they had exhibitions for themselves. Many of them banded together and formed the group called UB12, a collective of artists who defied the government mandates on artist expression. To assist in this effort, Freeman transported their artwork to the United States, where he would sell it, and then he would send the proceeds back to Czechoslovakia, along with paint and other art supplies and things that the artists couldn't get in Czechoslovakia. He also bought quite a few of the pieces himself because he just liked the art that much. The first artist we will talk about today is Pravoslav Kotik, born in 1889, died in 1970. Kotik studied at Prague's School of Applied Arts, graduating in 1912. He began teaching in secondary schools in 1913 and continued this until 1939. While teaching in Prague in 1919, he became a member of the Association of Visual Artists Manas, along with sculptor Karel Kotrba. Sorry, I might be having a little trouble with the names, but I'll get through it. And fellow painters Karel Holin and Miroslav Holy. Kotik founded a group called Ho Ho Coco in 1925. The name was later changed to Social Art Group. I always want to say Socialist Art Group. Forgive me. This is one of my favorite pieces. Initially, Kotik's work was influenced by Fauvism and Expressionism. He gravitated towards Cubism in the 1920s and later to Neoclassicism. Kotik is, in fact, best known for his abstract, cubist, figurative, and non-objective painting. His works were first exhibited in 1910, when he was still a student, under the pseudonym P. Kraus. His first solo exhibition was in 1927 in Prague. Kotík constantly renewed his style throughout his career, so he always moved ahead of the avant-garde. Kotík's dynamic figures reflect his favorite treatment of the dramatic expression of human gesture and movement. His graphic works and illustrations depict social and intimate themes that were not condoned by the Communists' Directed Artists Organization. He was expelled from the Association of Visual Artists, MANAS, in 1930. By the 1950s, Kotík was something of a recluse, having been banned from exhibiting his work by communist officials. I thought there was one more. Vladimír Janoušek, born in 1922, died in 1986. His formal training included courses at the School of Arts and Crafts in Brno and Prague's School of the Applied Arts. However, his studies were interrupted in the early 1940s by the forced labor imposed upon occupied countries by Nazi Germany. After the war, he was accepted into the Professional Art Studio program at the University of Applied Arts in Prague. Here he met and married fellow sculptor Věra Havlová and also developed his sculptural expression. Janoušek became a member of the Czechoslovak Union of Visual Artists and the Art Workshop in Prague in 1952, and he remained so until 1970. He was a founding member of the creative artists group called UB12 in 1960. You'll be hearing UB12 a lot. He and his wife worked together in a joint studio. Janoušek contrasted vague outlines with fixed geometric structures to depict the relationship between the figures and the space they are in. He later developed interactive sculptures with mobile elements in the form of pendulums. Most of his drawings and paintings served as studies for his sculptures. This is reflected in the piece here, which is also in the exhibit. This is sort of the background of it, you might say, which is painted wood. And then there are these pieces in front, which sort of serve as the foreground. And then in between is this large circle with a metal piece that comes down like this to a small circle that kind of counterbalances it. So for me, what I like to say is that you can see how it gives the sun here the ability to sort of sway over the land, over the horizon. Janoušek was no longer able to exhibit his works in Prague or abroad after the renewed communist occupation in 1968 and subsequent normalization of society. Two major exhibitions of his work planned for 1980 and 1986 were banned by the communist authorities of the day, and he died without ever exhibiting his work publicly again. Jiří Mrázková, born in 1923, died 2016. Was born in Prague to an English mother and a Czech father. However, they divorced when she was 5 years old, and so she grew up in Czechoslovakia with just her mother. She became a teacher after graduating from secondary school, but stopped after a year to study graphic art. She was later accepted to the School of Applied Arts in Prague, but only attended for 1 year before the school was closed for World War II. Mrázková did not return to school, but continued to paint in her home. She and her husband, painter Jiří Mrázek, were members of the creative artists group UB12. As an artist, Mrázková participated in a number of exhibitions. Her earliest work was wood engraving, but she quickly moved on to oil painting. She first focused on portraits and figures, gradually becoming more abstract in the 1960s. Her devotion to oils also changed to drawing, and particularly with colored pencils. In the 1960s, the 1960s brought more change to Mrázková's life when she began writing and illustrating children's books that featured talking animals that had friendships with humans. She and her husband moved to London in 1964, where she published books regularly until 1982, when her husband became ill. She only took up painting again after his death in 2008, and then displayed her works in a collective exhibition in 2011. Today, Mrázková is probably more well known as a children's book author and illustrator than as a painter. Adriena Šimotová, born in 1926, died in 2014, studied at the Academy of Arts, Architecture, and Design in Prague between 1945 and 1950. After graduation, she participated in the Expo 58 in Brussels. Oh, sorry about that. Šimotová was a dominant figure in both the Czech art scene and of the early 1970s and the political struggle of the Prague avant-garde. She brought the expression of the suffering body, the basis of her artistic approach, to the highest level of symbolic significance. She and her husband, painter Jiří, were members of the creative artists group UB12, which was committed to maintaining a humanistic and spiritual tradition that was not accepted under communism. I like this one. It looks like it just has shoes. After the deaths of her husband and son, Šimotová abandoned classical painting methods for wall collages, or special drawings, as she called them, that were made of juxtaposed materials, such as canvas, fabric, glass, lead, and paper. This shift led her to develop all new techniques and practices. One of her signature methods consisted of manipulating, cutting, and stacking paper. She also created work with fingerprints, feet, and the whole body. Her works bent the very life of the human form, figures no longer appearing as a whole, but rather in torn, scattered fragments crossed by empty spaces and other interruptions. After a solo show of her work at the Václavské Gallery in 1970, Šimotová was not permitted to show her work in Prague for almost 20 years, though it became well known abroad. From 1991 to 1998, she taught at the International Summer Art Academy in Salzburg. Šimotová's revolutionary new approach to art was recognized with a large retrospective at the National Gallery on the occasion of her birthday, 75th birthday. In 2005, the Culture of Ministry granted her the prestigious State Award for Fine Arts. Moving on to her husband. Jiří, born in 1923, died in 1972. Jean came from a poor rural family. During World War II, he learned pipe fitting and plumbing while working in a country factory. After the war, he studied in Prague at the Academy of Arts, Architecture, and Design. His entire body of work arose from his childhood experience, focusing on natural myth, the origin of life, and marriage of light and darkness. He first experimented with watercolors and then oil paints, as you see here. Later, he concentrated on graphic design. He was a member of the Arts Forum UB12 and the Haller Association of Graphic Artists. Jan was offered a commission in 1954 to create a memorial at the Jewish Museum in the Penkus Synagogue in Prague. I wish we had pictures of this, but I'll just have to tell you about it. Jan accepted and worked on the project with a colleague named Václav Boštík. Together, the two men wrote 77,000 names of victims on the walls of the synagogue between 1955 and 1959. I imagine it was a very powerful site, and I would love to still see it. Jan started to teach painting at the Prague Academy of Fine Arts in 1963. Unfortunately, he began to suffer from a long incurable disease in the mid-60s that affected his ability to teach and eventually to create art. As a result, he turned more toward drawing in the late 60s. He saw himself as a mere object of medical care, and as such, the once harmonic nuances of his artworks became sharp and harsh contrasts. He used his work to meditate on the connection between life and death until he passed away in 1972. Zdeněk Hula, born 1948, attended the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague between 1966 and 72, studying figurative painting. In the mid-1970s, he worked as a night watchman at the National Gallery, which I think is just ironic. And from 1975 to 76, he worked in a ceramics studio as a glazier on the restoration of monumental works of art. Hula founded the private art gallery H with his brother Jiří Hula and Josef Volovich in 1983. The gallery quickly gained infamy as an important center of alternative art culture. Hula organized and participated in many confrontational exhibits at Gallery H throughout the 1980s. He and Volovich also organized an interdisciplinary symposium in 1990 that has since become an ongoing series that continues to this day. Hula now teaches drawing and painting at Charles University in Prague. And in addition to this, he's begun working with a wider variety of materials to create his art, instead of just painting and drawing. He's expanded further into stone and things like that in the 1990s and has brought glass and granite together in unique ways, really unique ways. This is kind of your bonus piece. This one is actually not at Missouri right now. It's kind of on permanent display in our grand hall in the museum. So you'll have to come and see it see it in person if you want. This donation of 26 works from Lee Freeman's personal art collection adds an important dimension to our holdings at the National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library. Artists Caught Behind the Iron Curtain highlights many of the superb artists from the period. When it was displayed at the NCSML, it also included 15 additional works from Lee Freeman's collection. But he did not give to us. The pieces on exhibit at MSSU now show the varied work and tell the stories of artists who struggled to express their talent, even risking imprisonment, at a time when socialist realism was the only government-sanctioned approach to art. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions? Do you have a favorite piece of the ones that we have on display?
Yes. Excuse me. I really like the one that has the sun, that's sort of the pendulum thing I was talking about. I really like that one. And the first time we picked it up to install it and the sun thing sort of moved, I really freaked out because I didn't realize it was a separate piece. So I just had a minor heart attack. But I really like that one.
Yeah, we had fun installing that one, just making sure that it was okay. So are there any other questions? T-Jorn? You look like you have a question, but
Hello. I noticed that most of the work were untitled, and I just wanted to know if there were any like original names to some of the pieces.
No, I'm afraid they're pretty much all just untitled. I kind of wish some of them had names, but nobody gave any of them any.
anyone else? Well, so I want to thank you, Tricia, for the talk and for loaning us this wonderful collection. I also want to thank Dr. Chad Stebbins for funding this exhibition and bringing the work to campus. He is the director of the Institute for International Studies and then also the Katherine L. Hyde Foundation, the charitable trust, for supporting this artist talk series. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you, Tricia.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
We do have a reception to follow in the gallery, so if you have not seen the show, you can head over there and we'll be over there soon and we can answer any other questions you might have about the work in the gallery. And thank you for coming. So, oh, the code word, wait, the code word for my classes is, pick a code word. Check, yes, so check. Very good, thank you. So those online and here in person, you're in my class, you'll have a space to enter that later this evening on Blackboard. So thank you for coming, have a good day. Thanks again, Tricia.
You're welcome, thank you.